Hi, everybody. Welcome to our third class in our Nourished Life Nutrition Education series. Today's class is about grocery shopping and meal prepping. My name is John Redenberg. I am the manager of the Employee Wellness Program in Jacksonville, and I'm also a registered dietitian. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about shopping and meal prepping because it can be a source of a lot of distress, and it doesn't need to be. And just like anything, with a few tweaks and a good plan, we can really make this job a lot more productive and a little bit more enjoyable for you as well as the rest of your family. As always, each class in this session is being recorded for your convenience, and we will be sharing details about the recordings and any information about the available slides after each class to everyone that's registered for this program. And also, after next week's session, which will be the last class in our series, we'll be sending out a post-program survey and questionnaire, which you will be asked to complete, and we will also use that to provide attendance credit for those of you that need points towards your healthcare premium reduction. So again, lots of information to cover. And as always, if there's any questions that you might have, you can go ahead and unmute yourself or type it in the chat, and I'll try my best to get those questions answered. And of course, you can always wait until the end too. It's really up to you. I want to make sure this is as beneficial for you as possible. And what I want to try to cover today with the time that we have together is we'll talk some about supermarket shopping, what supermarkets do to get you to spend a little bit more money and how you can make yourself a little bit more prepared. We'll also take a look back at a little bit more detail as far as comparing food labels. So in last session, we actually talked about breaking down the food labels and what areas to focus in on, but I'm going to use some real world examples to kind of show you how to apply some of those lessons that were imparted earlier. I'm also going to share with you something I think is very important, especially as we look to stretch our food dollars, and that is some tips to help you reduce the amount of food that you might be wasting at home. And then lastly, we'll discuss some menu planning tips for you and your family. So first, let's take a look at the grocery store. So no matter where you like to shop, whether it's Publix or Winn-Dixie or Walmart or Target, every supermarket invests a lot of money in determining how to lay out their aisles, how to position products on their shelves, what kind of music to play to get you more in the mood to spend money. And the bottom line is supermarkets are just trying to get all of your senses engaged because research shows this is helping increase spending. So you may have noticed some things over the years that your carts are a little bit bigger. So therefore, if you put a loaf of bread and some eggs and milk in a big old cart, it looks a little lonely in there. So you might be more enticed to add more products to it. Checkout lines are also pretty narrow. So the idea here is that once you get in that line, they really don't want you to leave. So that's part of the design implementation there. Also, at least when I go shopping, I always notice that milk and eggs are located conveniently 6 miles from the entrance. And there's a couple of reasons why that is. One, skeptics might say that, yes, that does entice you to walk across more square footage of the store. But also on the practical side, that's typically where your loading docks are positioned too. So there's a positive and a negative to that placement there too. But some other things that you may have noticed, we'll see combination items placed together, whether it's, canned pumpkin and crust for pumpkin pie season or chocolate and graham crackers for s'mores. All these things to maybe give you some ideas that weren't already on your mind to help put more products in your cart. And then also, how things are positioned on the shelf themselves are also done with design. Typically speaking, for most of your major supermarket chains, you're paying more money, or companies are paying more money for positioning on that middle shelf. And also, supermarkets are wanting to place higher profit items right there at eye level. The one exception where this is not done is on the cereal aisle. You'll notice that they're a little bit lower because guess what? Those 3-foot and 4-foot children of ours are able to see those cereals that are a little bit more enticing. And again, it's all done for a reason. There's 50,000 items typically in most grocery stores. So there's a lot of purchasing decisions to be made and lots of ways that supermarkets help you get to spend a little bit more. So the flowers, where they're placed, they help engage all the senses. You'll see the fruit typically at the front of a a grocery store. And part of the idea here there is when you load up on produce, that might make you a little bit more vulnerable to some of those guilty pleasures like Oreo cookies and potato chips, because let's face it, you already got some healthy stuff. So maybe some things that aren't quite the same health level might be okay for you. So some things to be mindful of when we look at grocery store navigation and when we look to combat this, or again, to help get the most of our money and the most of our time. It goes without saying that having that list is key. Sticking to the items that are on that grocery list, but also to take it a step further, if I'm trying to save money, try to keep a price notebook. Be aware of what you might usually pay for a loaf of bread or apples or orange juice or milk or pasta. This way you'll know whether or not a truly marked item that says special or sale price is actually much different from its usual price. I've also found it helpful to be brand variable when looking at some of the staples from the grocery store. And of course, never really trying to shop on an empty stomach. So if possible, have a snack beforehand. And for those of you that have small children, if you can go to the grocery store alone, that helps make that visit a little bit more efficient too. Because remember, the more time you spend in that grocery store, the more money you are likely to spend there as well. So other things that might help you be a little bit more efficient, of course, is learning your store. Everyone's stores are laid out a little bit differently, although most grocery stores kind of embrace the same overall business model in terms of where things are placed on the perimeter. But just learning where certain key items are relative to your own personal menu is going to help reduce your time there, as well as the best time to visit. Typically, when grocery stores are first open, they're going to be typically less crowded than towards that post-work rush that we all might be familiar with. So some things to keep in mind when navigating the supermarket. Now, when we also look at trying to stretch our food dollar, I think this is where just reminding you of the unit price. Many of you are already familiar with this when you're looking at products, when you're comparing pastas or cereals or fruits or other options. You'll have the unit price listed right next to the item price. And the idea here is that you want to try to look for things that maybe cost a little bit less per that unit. You can also apply this to non-grocery items like paper towels and toilet paper to say, okay, well, if this package is $2.39, but it's 21 cents per unit, and the other one's $2.19, but it's 29 cents per unit, the other buy might be based on the one that's the lower price per unit. So some things that can help you really get the most of your food dollar. Now, if you're sticking to your list, of which we'll talk about how to build it from your own personal family menu, you're going to save the most money there. But the other thing to keep in mind is that when we're looking at those products, take a closer look and compare those food labels. So remember, last week we learned all about what's on the food label and how to read them. But I find it more practical to try to compare similar products within key categories to see what might be the most nutrient dense or the most healthful of food choices. Again, trying to compare items you're already purchasing and seeing where you can maybe save some sodium or save some added sugar or save some added fat and choose accordingly. I found this advice is a little bit more helpful than trying to memorize all of the different numbers as far as what we should be limiting certain nutrients to. On the screen is a good example of how to approach this. So first things first, when we're comparing two products, in this particular example, we're looking at servings of turkey breast, so deli type of turkey meat for sandwiches. Always want to see if we're comparing the same weight. So the same serving size. One serving size is 3 slices, the other one's 2 ounces. Well, if I look closely at the grams, we see we have 57 grams to 56 grams. That's pretty much the same. That's very, very close. So we know we have pretty much the same amount of turkey per serving for each product. But notice the key difference here for something like sodium. The product on the left has 700 milligrams of sodium per serving, whereas the one on the right has 320 milligrams of sodium. So by far, nutritionally speaking, we can see the product on the right has a lot less sodium and might be a more healthful choice. And also another thing to keep in mind, since it has less sodium, that means it's made with less broth, and therefore you're actually getting more protein too. So you're actually getting more actual turkey for your dollar than this product here. So ways to really look at some of your labels, because I think by and large, when we're trying to make healthful food choices for the family, I always try to look closely at added sugars and added sodiums and trying to choose accordingly. Another way you can apply this for benefit is taking a look at those cereals that you can consume and seeing where you can maybe afford to reduce some of that added sugar. The Environmental Working Group which is a very large trade agency, and they are well known for doing their Dirty Dozen produce, you know, the type of produce that has the most pesticide residue. But they also took a look at popular children's cereals and compared the least sugary to the most sugary. So this is just a little graphic for your own benefit, so you can kind of navigate right off the bat to see which sugars might actually have a little bit more sugar than you expected, and which ones might be a lot lower in sugar overall and perhaps better choices for your family. Because again, 50,000 items you're being exposed to in that grocery store, but there's only one person that's going to be responsible for making that right choice. Remember, looking at those labels, focus on those facts, focus on the ingredients, look at the price, and remember everything else on there is just marketing, just like we talked about last week. So you are the one that is in charge of making the right choice. Don't expect just because a box of Kellogg's chocolate Rice Krispies says boosts immunity, that's going to be the best product for you. Don't be dissuaded by a lot of those marketing messages on the front of the package. Instead, look at those nutrition facts and the ingredients and make the best choice based on what your own family's personal health and wellness goals are. And if all goes according to plan, and we're building this list from a well-developed menu, we can do something that many families are trying very hard to do right now, and that is limit how much food they're wasting. Believe it or not, we look at overall food production in this country. It's estimated that we waste about 30 to 40% of our U.S. food supply. Think about that for a minute. Think about how many people go hungry in the U.S. each year and how much we're wasting. There are a lot of opportunities for improvement overall. When we look where most of that food waste comes from, almost half of it's from our own homes. Another 40% from restaurants, 16% from farms, and then 2% in manufacturing. So again, a lot of the food we waste comes from our own homes. I'm guilty of it just like anyone else. There's ways that we can help improve that to minimize that food waste. We might not be able to get it to zero, but we can certainly look at some tips and tricks that have helped me, and I think can also help you when we look at overall food waste. And if we look at those contributors to food waste, there's a lot of key areas that overlap here, and a lot of it stems from not having a good menu plan in place. So the planning can impact how much food we buy, and it might lead us to over purchase food, which can lead to food waste. We might end up over preparing certain food items, and once we prepare it, that's kind of on a time clock of 3 to 4 days before it needs to be discarded as leftovers. A lot of times we're just confused by the date, and then sometimes food can outright spoil. But I think right here, this is where we see the most opportunity for improvement, because those dates are pretty confusing. And what I want you to keep in mind is that when we look at dates of food product and the type of dates that you're seeing on your packages, 99% of that label dating is just for food quality. It has nothing to do with whether or not a food is harmful. So I don't want you to confuse the, best by date of, let's say, April 1st means that on April 2nd, it's going to kill you. So there you have some flexibility there. We've evolved pretty well as a species to be able to identify when food has spoiled. But let's take a look at what some of these terms actually mean. So remember, none of these are really regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. The only product that actually is required by law to have a date on it is infant formula. Everything else is mostly referring to just food quality. So you can see what a sell-by date could mean. You can see what the best if used by date might mean, and the use by date and the expiration date. Again, it all comes down to trying to use your own judgment here when we're looking at some of these products. Outside of infant formula and prepared food that's left over, the only other potential food group that you need to be most mindful of as far as potential for food waste and getting you potentially sick is going to be deli meat. So deli meat, it's again not a hard, fast rule, but typically you want to try to make sure you're using up that deli meat within a week or so after opening it. And then as it starts to turn, you're going to start to notice the smell, and that might lead to some foodborne illness. But everything else, mostly it's just food quality, whether it's ketchup, whether it's mustard, whether it's a box of Triscuits, you name it. Most of those package dates that you see on your shelves and in your pantry and your refrigerator are referring to just food quality. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're evaluating some of those dates. You do have some flexibility there. You do have some ability to go beyond that date. And a lot of it's going to be primarily dictated by how well it's handled and if you're shielding it from air and moisture. So if you're using properly sealed containers and properly sealed boxes and such, you're going to be able to go a lot longer past that quote unquote sell by date than if you were just having it unopened and not well maintained. So if we look at trying to really tackle food waste, let's say this is something you want to do for your family, I would encourage you to take a look for 30 days, and maybe 30 days, if that's too lengthy of a timeline for you, maybe just take a week or 2 weeks. But I want you to track all of your food waste. What are you noticing that you're throwing away? Is it bread? Is it produce? Is it meats? Look at those recurring trends and see where maybe you can isolate a few potential root causes. Are you noticing that you're over preparing certain foods when they're on the menu, whether it's chicken, whether it's beef, whether it's corn, whatever it might be? This is going to give you some information to tell you, okay, well, next time I notice I actually end up throwing out half a loaf of bread. So maybe when I go to the bakery, I'll ask for half a loaf of bread, because they will package that specially at most of your grocery store locations. And then also take a look at what you have already on your shelves right now. If you have unopened, canned, and packaged foods that have no planned use, this would be a good time to donate them to the food bank, because the other thing that we want to try to do here is that as we clear out some of this inventory that has no planned use, you're making it easier to manage your own inventory. You're getting better organized. And when you have better organization in your kitchen, you can stay on top of your own inventory. And again, down the line can lend itself to reduce incidence of food waste. So getting those cabinets organized, getting everything labeled, taking a look at cooking equipment and tools that you just don't use, free up some space in that cabinet so you have a little bit easier time to maneuver. A lot of times, if you're overwhelmed by different kitchen utensils and an overload of kitchen products, it might lead to some frustration. You open that door and then you shut it right back and just order pizza. So we don't want that to happen if we can minimize it. So try to get everything a little bit organized and maybe group items together as you would on a menu. Whether it's your snacks or whether it's your staples like beans and rice, this will help make it a little bit easier to track your inventory too. And then another thing that I found helpful for myself and my family is really looking at using clear containers, so whether it's glass or something else that makes it easier to see, okay, well, are these carrots, is this celery, or is this leftover cheesecake? What exactly am I actually looking at in my refrigerator as I'm trying to assess my overall inventory. So those clear containers that are dated and organized makes it easier to plan everything accordingly. And that's the thing. A plan is the key. So we want to develop a weekly menu before you go grocery shopping, and try to stick to some of those family favorites, whether it's spaghetti or tacos or you name it. And then just be strategic whenever you're trying a new nutritional item. Just try one new item at a time. It might take several attempts to get your family on board with it. But again, use those tried and true family favorites to build that weekly menu. Set aside some time so you have the flexibility in which to do so. Shop from your pantry and fridge first, and then take a look at where you're spending some of your grocery dollars. This can also help save you some money. I found that there are certain things that I can get at Publix versus Target that might be a better price, and vice versa. So wherever you're alternating your Publix or Winn-Dixie with Target or Walmart or Fresh Market or Trader Joe's, having 1 to 2 to maybe 3 locations for food purchases can go a long way at helping you save some food money as well. The other thing we can do when we look at trying to be a resourceful chef is really try to hone in and capitalize on the flexibility that canned and frozen foods can be for you. These things are going to last almost indefinitely and are an always ready resource for you. So again, having these on ready supply can go a long way at helping limit food waste. And then try to build that weekly menu that you might be building with ingredients that spoil more quickly, like the meats and your greens and your fish, and take a look at everything you're putting into that grocery cart. If it's going into your grocery cart, ask yourself, when am I going to eat this? Does this have a planned use on my menu? Is this going to be a snack that myself or my family will enjoy? And if it's not, put it right back on the shelf, because if you don't, chances are you'll end up throwing it out in 6 months and you'll end up wasting more food dollars. Another thing that I've found that's helpful, and if you want to take out your phone, you can scan this QR code and get this document, but we'll also send it out in the follow-up email. This is just, one of many guides that are out there that talk about where we can store produce, what's best in the pantry, what's best on the countertop, and what's best in the refrigerator. And when I say what's best, I mean what's going to help impact the shelf life of this product, what's going to help us keep it fresher longer. So typically the back of your fridge is going to be the coldest location. So that'd be an ideal place to put dairy products like milk. Cutting the roots, tops off of root vegetables like carrots can also help extend the shelf life. And then, believe it or not, in most cases, not washing fruits and vegetables before storing them can help them last a little bit longer, because again, you're minimizing some of that moisture that can cause it to deteriorate a little bit more quickly. The one exception that I've noticed from just my own personal experience is whenever I buy strawberries, I try to remove them from the container and put them in a more airtight container to help them last a little bit longer. So again, some things to think about when you're looking at trying to help stretch the freshness from your fruits and vegetables. All right, lastly, moving right along here, we'll talk about menu planning. All right, so when we look at menu planning, I try to set aside a time each week to do it, and if you get stuck with ideas and stuck on ideas on what to try, always those theme nights seem to work easily, like whether it's a taco night, a pasta night and such, and you can build your menu around that. But really invest the time in this where you can look at your cookbooks and your recipes and your blogs and all the culinary websites for ideas. I've listed a few. There's millions out there, and you have to figure out for yourself which is going to be best for you. I know I've found a lot of times it's kind of frustrating because you'll find some good recipes on blogs, but then it's preceded by like a 10-page short story on why this Brunswick stew is the backbone of this family's kitchen, when in fact I just want the ingredients and the recipe. But again, that's usually through trial and error, that research part of that menu building. So again, you list columns for the days of the week and then build around entrees or meals. And this way you have your tools in place to know exactly what you need at the grocery store. And this is key because the other thing that this is doing, when we look at trying to help optimize our health and well-being, is that by having a weekly menu in place, and again, you can easily write Friday night dinner, that's the meal that will go out. But by having a weekly menu planner like this in place, you'll minimize that impulsive dining out and drive-through eating that can really be a detriment to our nutritional well-being. So that's really the main thrust behind this, is trying to make sure you're really devoting some time and attention to menu planning to help make the rest of the week a little bit easier, knowing, oh, well, tonight is Tuesday night. That's the night I was going to make tacos, or Wednesday, we're going to make spaghetti, or Thursday, we're going to make a roast chicken. So you have an idea at least of what you're going to be building from. And when you get home from a long day at work with the kids, you already know what's on tap. So if we look at trying to make it a little bit easier, again, just a little bit easier, shopping and cooking on those off days, keeping our kitchen stocked with a lot of staples and components that have a lot of multi-uses, whether it's canned beans, your frozen vegetables, your marinara sauces. And then as you're building that menu, again, to help, optimize food waste and make sure we're not throwing too much out, look for those things that you can actually alternate on other days of the week. So that chicken that you roast, we can use some of that leftover chicken for chicken tacos the next day. And then perhaps the day after that, we can put together some type of chicken and vegetable stew or soup. If we look at general recommendations for leftovers, 4 days is the typical max for consuming whatever is left over from meal prep. But the other thing to keep in mind is you can also freeze what's cooked. So in other words, if you've made that roast chicken, so you know what, I've got quite a bit of chicken left over here, you can freeze it once it's already been cooked. And once you thaw it and bring it up to temperature again, up to 165 degrees, it's ready to eat again in some other type of stew or casserole item. So be mindful that the freezer is your friend when we're looking at stretching our food dollar and helping with menu planning. So the other thing that's helpful for some families is, batch cooking. So trying to cook, whether it's the chicken or whether it's chili or whether it's something else, you can batch cook and partition it out accordingly in your refrigerator or freezer. And that can serve as some meals later on in the week or later on in the month if you freeze it, or something that you can use for lunchtime. You can look to shop and wash, chop, and store all of your fresh veggies all at once. So you have those ready to go, and typically having them cut up and ready to eat small sizes, it makes it a little bit more appealing to the family. And again, really helps minimize cooking time on the other days. And then the other thing that's really helpful, many of you are already aware of this, is that slow cooker. Slow cooker is a good way to help get dinner on the counter right before you leave for work from the day, or even with an Instapot, you can reduce that time even further. And again, help make the meal prep process a little bit easier. So some final tips before we close out and open up to any questions here. If we, I see there's one in the question now, in the chat now, I'll get to in a moment. So when we look at overall final tips and words of advice, when we look at trying to menu plan, if you can get the whole family involved, especially if you have young children and trying to get them more interested in fruits and vegetables and healthier eating patterns, getting them involved in menu planning can go a long way at helping improve that process. Building your menus, of course, around your in-stocked inventory. Take a look at those canned and frozen options. Read those labels carefully. Again, just comparison shop within products you're willing to try. Don't be overwhelmed by all the different marketing claims on the front of the package, but instead look at those nutrition facts and ingredients and go from there. And if you can't exercise portion control, again, for some of those snack foods that might be something a little bit less than nutritious, whether it's the chips or the cookies, then don't buy it. A lot of these snack foods, through their combination of salt, fat, and sugar, make it very difficult to keep portion size in moderation. So rather than get you into any nutritional issues, I think the best advice sometimes for certain products, again, what your potential issues might be as far as nutritional pitfalls, but the best advice just to not even put it in the cart if you can't exercise portion control. And just as a reminder, we do offer health coaching and nutrition counseling. We've got information on the Gator Care website on how to access nutritional counseling. But if you forget all those links, just send me an email, wellness@jax.ufl.edu. All right, so good question here. How do I feel about meal delivery services such as HelloFresh? I think they're a convenient way to help novice cooks learn how to cook. I used it quite a bit, and I would categorize myself as a novice cook. I'm not an expert cook, and I used HelloFresh for several months, and I was preparing all sorts of cool things. But they're not for everybody. They don't. For me, in my experience with them, it didn't really save me much time. Also made the kitchen kind of a disaster. I actually nicknamed it Hello Mess after a while. But if I'm looking to do more home prepared foods and I want to have the items already curated for me, I think they do present a better option than going out to eat and spending a little bit more money and getting a little bit more higher calorie choices. But again, they're not for everybody because they do take a considerable amount of time if we look at certain items that are used. And there's a whole host of options there, whether it's HelloFresh, whether it's Blue Apron. Seems like there's a new one each week. I don't have a one that I would rank far and away above all the others. It's more of a matter of picking and choosing which one might work best for you. But yeah, I liked all the meals we had there. I never walked away from a HelloFresh meal thinking, wow, that wasn't very good. So it was all tasty, but was a lot of work for me to put it all together, and kitchen kind of took a beating during that. But hey, it's better than going out to all you can eat buffet. So great question. Any other questions? Go ahead and put them in the chat. As a reminder, we will send out all of these slides and recording details after today's session. And again, want to try to make this opportunity for you to get some nutrition counseling. We do offer that for all Gator Care members as well. So I'll be hanging out in the lobby waiting for any other questions, but right now I will stop the recording and wish you a good day.